She laughed when the Alpha King rejected her, not knowing she was the last of her kind. For the crime of being wolfless, weak, and unworthy of the Obsidian Vanguard, I, Alpha King Elliot Burke, reject you, Crystal Ramsay, as my fated mate. The decree echoed like a death sentence across the grand hall. The pack nobility held their breath, waiting for the frail girl on her knees to beg, scream, or shatter under the unbearable agony of a severed bond. Instead, a low vibration filled the room. It wasn't a sob. It was a chuckle that quickly bloomed into a full, radiant laugh. I accept your rejection, Your Majesty. Crystal beamed, rising slowly to her feet as the heavy stone pillars of the hall began to tremble with a violent, unnatural rhythm. But I hope your armies know how to fight in the dark, because you just broke the only lock keeping this kingdom alive. The Obsidian Vanguard pack was a fortress of vanity, built over centuries of conquered territories. Within the grand hall, lit by cascading crystal chandeliers, the air was thick with the scent of rain, wolf musk, and impending cruelty. Tonight was the lunar solstice, the night the Alpha King was meant to officially bind his soul to his fated mate. For Elliot Burke, an alpha whose ambition eclipsed his wisdom, the revelation of his mate had been a catastrophic disappointment. Crystal Ramsay was an anomaly. She possessed no wealth, no political backing, and worse, no inner wolf. She was a dormant, a shifter whose beast had never awakened. In a kingdom that prized ruthlessness, she was a liability. Standing beside Elliot was Veronica Stone, the daughter of the pack's highest-ranking general. Veronica was tall, striking, and radiating calculated malice. She wore a gown of midnight blue silk, her chin tilted upward as she looked down at Crystal. Veronica was the mate Elliot wanted. She offered a strategic alliance and an infusion of military might. You find this amusing, Crystal? Elliot's voice was a low, dangerous rumble. The mate bond, a sacred tether woven by the moon goddess, pulsed between them, a desperate, bleeding thread that Elliot was holding a blade to. I find it tragically ironic, Your Majesty, Crystal replied, her voice steady as she dusted off the knees of her simple cotton dress. In the crowd, Crystal's adoptive parents, Ralph Elliot and Alicia Perkins, clung to each other. Ralph, a weathered man who had spent his life tending the pack's borders, looked as though he might intervene, but Alicia held his arm tightly, tears streaming down her face. They knew the laws. To challenge the Alpha King's rejection was death. You are a dormant, Gordon Ball, the pack's chief elder, sneered from the high table. Gordon was a man corrupted by decades of dark, whispered secrets. You possess no strength and no lineage. The Alpha King requires a Luna who can lead armies, not a fragile charity case. Crystal's gaze drifted from Gordon to Elliot. I am a dormant because my blood was never meant to shift. It was meant to bind. Silence. Veronica snapped. Take your rejection and leave. You are banished from the Vanguard. Elliot watched Crystal intently. Veronica speaks with my authority. Leave us. As Crystal accepted the rejection, the psychic tether between them snapped. But instead of the agonizing pain typical of a severed bond, a massive shockwave ripped through the hall. The crystal chandeliers shattered, raining glass upon the elite. A low, demonic howl echoed not from a wolf, but from deep within the earth beneath the castle. Crystal turned her back on the Alpha King, her laughter echoing over the screams of the panicked nobles. For 22 years, her dormant soul had acted as a magical lock, sealing away an ancient curse buried beneath the Vanguard territory. Elliot hadn't just rejected a mate. He had broken the ward. The Outer Rim was a desolate wasteland of jagged obsidian cliffs and howling, razor-sharp winds. For most exiles, stepping past the Vanguard's borders meant certain death by exposure within the hour. But as Crystal walked out into the freezing, torrential rain, she didn't even shiver. The heavy, oppressive fog that had clouded her mind and weighed down her limbs for 22 years had violently evaporated. In its place was a thrumming, electric energy, a living, breathing power that pulsed perfectly in time with her heartbeat. She felt like a caged star that had just been handed the keys to the universe. But she wasn't alone in the dark. The unnatural chill in the air deepened, carrying the foul stench of ozone and decayed earth. Red, glowing eyes materialized in the thick tree line. They were not wolves. The creatures that slinked out of the shadows were nightmares formed of shifting, oily black smoke and jagged bone. They were shadow stalkers, mindless, corrupted beasts that had been trapped in the subterranean caverns beneath the Vanguard estate for centuries. And now, they were slipping through the cracks of the broken seal. One of the beasts lunged, a blur of darkness and gnashing teeth aiming straight for her throat. Instinctively, Crystal threw her hands up. She didn't expect to shift, but she didn't expect to die either. A sudden, blinding flash of silver light erupted from her palms, forming a kinetic shield. The Shadow Stalker slammed into the barrier and shrieked, its smoky form sizzling and burning away into ash upon contact. Before the rest of the pack could descend on her, the underbrush exploded. A massive, heavily scarred silver wolf tore into the clearing. He didn't fight with wild, feral abandonment. He fought with lethal, military precision. Jaws snapped bones, and massive paws crushed the shadowy forms into dust. Within moments, the clearing was silent, save for the heavy panting of the silver beast. The wolf turned toward Crystal, his eyes intelligent and weary, before shifting back into his human form. He was a towering man draped in a heavy, weather-beaten leather coat. Crystal recognized him instantly from the hushed whispers of the Vanguard elders. It was Leon Bennett, a legendary former general who had been framed for treason and exiled 5 years ago. "You're bleeding," Leon grunted, wiping a smear of black, viscous fluid from his blade. He looked at the lingering silver glow fading from Crystal's hands with wide, disbelieving eyes. "The seal. It's completely broken, isn't it?" "They are waking up." Elliot rejected the bond, Crystal said, her voice eerily calm despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "The arrogant fool," Leon spat, sheathing his sword. "We have to move. The Vanguard patrols won't come out here, but the shadows will multiply by the hour. Follow my steps exactly." He led her through a brutal, blinding blizzard, navigating the treacherous terrain of the Crag Mountains. After an hour of grueling hiking, they slipped behind a frozen waterfall into a hidden, expansive cave system. The walls were lined with ancient, glowing blue runes that pulsed softly, keeping the freezing wind and the encroaching shadows at bay. Deep within the cavern, a fire crackled brightly. Across the flames sat Sabrina Cox. She was an elderly woman with long, stark white hair and milky, blind eyes. Sabrina was the last living oracle of the Forgotten Tribes, a woman dismissed as a lunatic by Gordon Ball and the Vanguard elite. "You are finally free, child." Sabrina smiled warmly, her unseeing eyes reflecting the firelight. She didn't look surprised. She looked relieved. "I felt the tremor all the way up here. The Usurper King has finally doomed himself." Leon draped a heavy fur blanket over Crystal's shoulders. She projected a raw ether shield. "Sabrina, I saw it. What is happening to me?" Crystal asked, looking down at her hands. The veins beneath her pale skin seemed to shimmer with a faint, ethereal silver light. "I thought I was a dormant. I thought I was broken." "You were never broken, Crystal. You were functioning exactly as you were designed to," Sabrina explained gently, pouring a cup of steaming, bitter herbal tea and pressing it into Crystal's hands. "The Obsidian Vanguard built their glittering castle over a hellmouth. Centuries ago, your ancestors, the Silverborn line, sacrificed their ability to shift into wolves to create a magical barrier. They locked the Eclipse demons away in the deep earth. To maintain that lock, a Silverborn heir had to be bound, body and soul, to the ruling alpha of the land. Elliot's ancestors knew this," Leon added, his voice dark with anger. "It was a sacred covenant. But over the centuries, the Vanguard kings grew arrogant. They wanted warrior queens, political alliances, and military might. They began to view the Silverborn as weak. They erased the old histories, rewrote the texts, and labeled your kind as dormants to justify subjugating you. Elliot is a fool who forgot his own history." Sabrina nodded gravely. "By rejecting you, he rejected the lock. And now, the Vanguard sits on a ticking time bomb of demonic energy that will consume the entire Northern Hemisphere." Crystal's heart tightened painfully. She thought of the Grand Hall, not of the nobles who mocked her, but of the people who didn't have a choice. Ralph and Alicia are still there. The children in the lower districts are still there. "They will die if the Vanguard falls," Sabrina said, her tone offering no comfort, only truth. "And Elliot's army cannot fight demons with teeth, claws, and silver swords. Weapons of men pass right through the shadows. Only the Apex, the fully awakened Silverborn Queen, can command the darkness to heal. But you cannot march on that castle alone, child. You need an army that understands the dark magic, an army that has been fighting it for centuries." "Who?" Crystal asked, the silver light in her eyes flaring as determination replaced her fear. "Frederick Norris," Leon replied. The name seemed to drop the temperature in the cave by 10 degrees. Crystal froze. To the Vanguard, Frederick Norris was the alpha of the Blood Moon Syndicate, a ruthless monster of the Deep South who bathed in the blood of his enemies. Frederick isn't a monster, Sabrina corrected, sensing her hesitation. That is more Vanguard propaganda. Frederick is the Warden of the North. His pack has been guarding the outer perimeters of the Hellmouth for centuries, bleeding in the mud while the Vanguard played politics in their crystal towers. He hates Elliot Burke, but he serves the Earth. Sabrina reached out, her frail hands finding Crystal's glowing face. If you want to save your people, you must claim your crown. You must cross the frozen wastes, walk into the Blood Moon Arena, and align with the Warden. Crystal looked into the fire, the flames reflecting in her luminous silver eyes. She had been cast out as a beggar. She would return as a god. When do we leave? She asked. 2 weeks had passed since the lunar solstice, and the Obsidian Vanguard was rotting from the inside out. The pristine white marble of the castle had stained an ugly, sickly gray, and the air constantly tasted of ash and copper. A thick, unnatural fog had rolled into the territory, clinging to the ground like a living entity. Pack members were falling violently ill, their veins turning black, their breathing shallow and labored. The wolves themselves were losing their minds. The infirmary overflowed with warriors who had turned feral in the night, attacking their own families in a blind, shadow-induced rage. Elliot Burke sat heavily on his obsidian throne, gripping the armrests until his knuckles turned white. He was a shell of the proud king who had banished Crystal. Dark circles bruised his eyes, and his skin was deathly pale. His inner wolf, once a source of roaring, dominant power, was now cowering in the recesses of his mind, howling in constant agony. It sensed an apex predator it could not see, a darkness that could not be bitten or clawed. The shadow sickness is spreading to the inner wards, Veronica Stone reported. Her voice, usually laced with a smooth, aristocratic confidence, was high and threaded with panic. Her immaculate appearance had crumbled. Her hair was disheveled, and she kept glancing over her shoulder at the dark corners of the hall. My father's troops are terrified, Elliot. They swung their silver swords at the creatures in the fog last night. The blades passed right through them. We are defenseless. Where is Gordon? Elliot snapped, standing up, though the sudden movement made him dizzy. The chief elder is supposed to know the old texts. He is supposed to know the history of this land and how to fix this. Gordon is in the crypts. A chilling, unfamiliar voice echoed through the vast hall. Elliot and Veronica spun around. Standing in the grand archway, silhouetted by the sickly twilight, was Paula Webb. She was Frederick Norris's Luna, a fiercely beautiful warrior known for her unyielding brutality. She was flanked by 2 massive Blood Moon guards whose eyes glowed with an eerie, runic light. They had bypassed the Vanguard's elite security patrols without raising a single alarm. How did you get in here? Elliot roared, his eyes flashing a desperate amber. He tried to project his alpha command, to force the intruders to their knees, but the magic sputtered and died in his chest. The land no longer recognized him as its protector. Your borders are dead, little king, Paula sneered, casually inspecting her sharp, manicured nails. Your sentries are either vomiting black blood or hiding under their beds. We walked right in. Frederick sent me to deliver a message. You are harboring a traitor, and your ignorance has doomed the entire hemisphere. Before Elliot could demand answers, the heavy oak floorboards of the hall groaned. Gordon Ball slowly walked out from the shadows beneath the mezzanine. But it wasn't the Gordon that Elliot knew. The elder's skin was paper-thin and translucent, showing black, writhing veins underneath. His eyes were entirely pitch black, leaking a dark, viscous fluid that sizzled when it hit the marble floor. The old texts cannot help you, Elliot, Gordon rasped. The voice seemed to come from multiple throats at once, layering a sickening demonic hiss over the elder's usual tone. A grotesque smile stretched across his face, revealing blackened teeth. Because I was the one who altered them. Elliot stumbled backward, grabbing the hilt of his ceremonial sword. Gordon, what have you done? I spent years whispering in your ear, Gordon continued, taking a slow, floating step forward. Convincing you that you deserved a warrior queen. Convincing you to reject the dormant girl. You were so blinded by your own vanity. You never questioned why I pushed so hard for you to sever the bond. I needed you to break the seal, Elliot, and like an obedient, arrogant puppy, you did exactly as you were told. Elliot's blood ran cold, as the horrifying puzzle pieces clicked together. You worship the Eclipse demons. They offer true power. Not the pathetic, conditional scraps the moon goddess leaves behind. Gordon laughed, spreading his arms wide. He raised his hands, and the shadows in the hall leaped to life. Veronica screamed a blood-curdling shriek as a shadow stalker, A creature of pure, condensed darkness, with glowing red eyes materialized from the corner of the room. It tackled her to the floor, its shadowy claws sinking into the stone around her throat. "You foolish boy," Gordon mocked, stepping toward the throne. "You threw away the only weapon that could have stopped this. The Silverborn Queen was your salvation, and you exiled her to the cold. Tonight, the Vanguard becomes the first fortress of the Eclipse." Elliot shifted with a massive, desperate roar, his bones cracking as he launched his wolf form at the traitorous elder. But Gordon simply waved a hand. A blast of dark kinetic energy, thick and suffocating, slammed into Elliot midair. The force shattered his ribs and threw him violently against the far stone wall. As his vision swam with pain and the darkness closed in, Elliot realized with agonizing clarity that Crystal's final words hadn't been a threat. They had been a prophecy. Deep within the Blood Moon Syndicate's territory, miles away from the rotting Vanguard, the air was sharp, cold, and electric. Crystal stood in the center of an ancient arena carved directly from black volcanic rock. The stadium was lined with hundreds of hardened Blood Moon warriors, their eyes locked on the tiny, frail-looking woman who had marched into their lands demanding an audience. Across from her stood Frederick Norris. He was a giant of a man, easily 6.5 feet tall, his bare chest covered in intricate runic tattoos designed to ward off dark magic. He radiated raw, untamed power, a stark contrast to the polished, superficial strength of Elliot Burke. "You walk into my territory, claiming to be the lost Silverborn Queen," Frederick rumbled, his voice echoing like grinding tectonic plates. He crossed his massive arms. "You ask for my army to march north. You ask us to bleed to save the very pack that humiliated you and left you to die? I ask you to fulfill your ancient oath, Warden," Crystal replied. She didn't shout, but her voice carried a bizarre, echoing resonance that sliced through the howling wind. The surrounding Blood Moon wolves shifted uneasily, a few of them instinctively baring their necks in submission to the sound alone. The Blood Moon were sworn to guard the perimeter of the Hellmouth. If the Vanguard falls, the shadows will march south. Your children will be the next to turn into ash. Frederick's eyes narrowed, studying her. He could smell no wolf on her. He sensed no physical threat. But the Oracle, Sabrina, stood at the edge of the arena, nodding silently. "Words are wind, little bird," Frederick challenged, rolling his shoulders. "If you are the apex, prove it. The Blood Moon follows strength, not fairy tales." With a deafening roar that shook the volcanic rock, Frederick shifted. He didn't just turn into a wolf. He became a monstrous, pitch-black dire wolf, a creature of nightmare and legend. Saliva dripped from jaws large enough to snap a man in half. He lunged at her with blinding speed, the ground cracking under his paws. Leon, standing near the entrance, cried out a warning and reached for his blade, but Sabrina held him back. Crystal didn't flinch. She didn't raise her arms to protect her face. She didn't attempt to shift. As Frederick's massive jaws snapped mere inches from her throat, the suffocating heat of his breath washing over her face, Crystal's eyes ignited. They flared with a liquid, blinding silver fire that illuminated the dark arena like a fallen star. She looked up into the eyes of the monstrous dire wolf and whispered a single word in the ancient, forgotten tongue of the first shifters. "Submit." It wasn't a request. It was a gravitational force. A shockwave of pure, divine silver energy erupted from Crystal's body, visible as a rippling ring of light. Frederick's massive wolf form was slammed down into the dirt, as if a mountain had been dropped on his back. The rock beneath him cratered. He snarled, trying to rise, his immense alpha pride fighting violently against the command. His muscles bulged, his claws digging into the stone. But the sheer, unquestionable authority of the Silverborn bloodline crushed his resistance. It was the magic of the earth itself demanding respect. With a heavy, rattling exhale, the dire wolf ceased its struggle. Frederick whimpered a sound his pack had never heard him make, and lowered his massive, terrifying head, until his snout rested gently against the toe of Crystal's leather boot. The entire arena fell dead silent. One by one, the fierce warriors of the Blood Moon Syndicate dropped to their knees, bowing their heads to the glowing woman in the center of the ring. Crystal stepped back, the silver fire slowly receding from her veins, leaving a faint, ethereal glow on her skin. Frederick shifted back to his human form. He was breathless, covered in volcanic dust, staring up at her in absolute awe. The legends were true. Frederick breathed, staying on one knee and bowing his head. "The true sovereign has returned to us. Gordon Ball has taken the Vanguard crypts," Crystal said, her expression hardening into a mask of pure royal authority. She was no longer a dormant outcast. She was a general. He intends to open the primary Hellmouth tonight. Gather your warriors, Frederick. We march on the vanguard. That night, the Blood Moon army rode out. But they were not invaders. They were the cavalry. Crystal rode at the front beside Frederick and Leon. As they crossed the borders into Vanguard territory, the corruptive, sickening fog tried to latch onto them, but Crystal's presence radiated a protective silver aura, a dome of light that burned the shadow sickness away, clearing a path for the army. She was a living god of war, bringing the dawn to a dying kingdom. The Obsidian Vanguard had devolved into a landscape of nightmares. The sky above the castle swirled with a massive vortex of dark purple clouds, crackling with black lightning. Shadow stalkers roamed the cobblestone streets in packs, tearing down doors and slaughtering anyone who hadn't managed to barricade themselves in the deep stone cellars. In the central courtyard, the horrific climax of Gordon's treason was underway. Elliot Burke was bound by heavy, glowing iron chains to a massive stone obelisk in the center of the square. His body was battered and bloody, his alpha aura completely drained by the dark magic permeating the air. Gordon Ball stood before him, chanting in a guttural, demonic language that made Elliot's ears bleed. The ground at the base of the obelisk was cracking, revealing a swirling abyss of pure, terrifying nothingness. Skeletal, shadowy hands were already beginning to reach up from the rift, grasping at the edges of the mortal world. To the side, Veronica Stone was locked inside an iron cage. She was weeping hysterically, her vanity and pride completely stripped away by the sheer terror of the monsters she had unwittingly helped unleash through her political scheming. "Watch, Elliot," Gordon sneered, his voice booming over the roaring wind. He raised a jagged obsidian dagger high into the air. "Watch your precious empire be consumed. Your alpha blood will be the key that tears this rift wide open." Just as Gordon prepared to plunge the dagger into Elliot's chest, a sound pierced the darkness. It was a horn deep, resonant, vibrating with a pure, unadulterated power that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. The massive iron gates of the Vanguard courtyard exploded inward in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Through the dust and swirling shadows rode Crystal Ramsey. The moment she crossed the threshold, the dark fog violently recoiled, screeching as it burned away in the presence of her blinding silver aura. Behind her, Frederick Norris, Paula Webb, and Leon Bennett led 1,000 Blood Moon warriors, their weapons glowing with protective runic light. "Kill them!" Gordon shrieked in a panic, pointing his dagger at the breached gates. "Stop her!" Hundreds of shadow stalkers detached from the walls and swarmed the courtyard, a tidal wave of claws and darkness. But the Blood Moon wolves met them with ferocious brutality. Leon Bennett shifted into a massive gray wolf, tearing through the enemy ranks, carving a bloody path straight toward the crypt entrance to secure the civilians. Frederick, back in his dire wolf form, crushed shadow demons beneath his massive paws, his runic tattoos flaring and burning the darkness to ash. Crystal dismounted, but she didn't draw a blade. She simply walked through the chaos. When a towering shadow demon lunged at her, jaws wide, it disintegrated into fine ash the moment it touched her silver aura. She was completely untouchable, a beacon of absolute purity walking through hell. Gordon panicked. He realized his dark magic was utterly useless against the apex of the Silverborn. Desperate, he raised the obsidian dagger with both hands, aiming to plunge it into Elliot's heart and finish the ritual before she could reach him. "No!" Crystal's voice boomed, layering with the ancient, echoing chorus of her ancestors. She raised her hand. A concussive pulse of kinetic silver energy shot across the courtyard like a cannonball. It slammed into Gordon with devastating force. The obsidian dagger flew from his grasp and shattered against the cobblestones. The corrupted elder was thrown violently backward, lifted off his feet, and pinned against the high courtyard wall by an invisible, crushing force that cracked the stone behind his spine. The battle ended almost as quickly as it had begun. With Gordon incapacitated and pinned to the wall, Crystal stepped to the edge of the opening rift. She knelt, pressing her glowing silver hands against the cracked earth. A blinding flash of light surged from her palms downward, sealing the hellmouth shut with the sound of a slamming vault door. Instantly, the remaining shadow stalkers dissolved into harmless black mist. The violent vortex above the castle dissipated, the dark clouds parting to reveal the clear, brilliant starry night of the northern hemisphere. The unnatural cold lifted, replaced by a gentle, clean breeze. Silence fell over the ruined courtyard, broken only by the heavy panting of the Blood Moon warriors. Slowly, tentatively, the surviving Vanguard members emerged from the cellars and crypts. Ralph and Alicia were among them, clutching each other as they stared in absolute disbelief. The frail, dormant girl they had raised. The girl who had been mocked and discarded was now radiating the terrifying, majestic power of an ancient deity. Elliot slumped heavily against his chains, gasping for air. Frederick stepped forward, his massive battle axe gleaming in the starlight, and shattered the iron links with a single, brutal swing. Elliot collapsed to the stone floor, coughing up blood. Slowly, he lifted his bruised face to meet Crystal's glowing silver eyes. "Crystal." Elliot choked out, a tear carving a path through the grime on his face. The crushing weight of his colossal mistake, his vanity, and his profound blindness finally broke his spirit completely. "You saved us." "I saved my land," Crystal corrected softly. She looked down at him without hatred, but with an absolute, chilling indifference. "You were merely a steward of a throne that was never yours to begin with." "I was a fool," Elliot wept openly, crawling forward over the broken stone and pressing his forehead near her boots. "I am sorry. Please, Crystal. The mate bond. The goddess made us for each other. I see it now. I see your worth. Rule with me. Be my Luna. We can rebuild." Crystal let out a soft, melancholic laugh that echoed hauntingly in the quiet courtyard. "There is no mate bond, Elliot. You severed it yourself. The goddess does not piece shattered glass back together for the sake of a coward who only recognizes value when it is holding a sword to his enemies. You are not my king, and you are no longer an alpha." As she spoke the words, she reached down and placed a glowing, silver hand on Elliot's head. A sudden, agonizing warmth flooded his chest. Elliot let out a guttural, echoing scream as the alpha spark, the magical, divine right to rule that had been passed down his bloodline, was forcefully ripped from his soul. A golden wisp of energy pulled from his chest and dissolved into the air. He slumped to the ground, panting, feeling a profound, terrifying emptiness. He had been reduced to a common, powerless wolf. Crystal stepped over him and turned her attention to Gordon Ball, who was still pinned against the wall, thrashing helplessly. "Gordon Ball," Crystal's voice rang out with the terrible weight of justice, "for high treason, murder, and attempting to unleash the eclipse upon the world. You will be thrown into the deepest level of the Vanguard crypts, and the seal will be locked behind you. You wanted the dark. You shall have it for eternity." Gordon screamed a terrible, desperate sound as Frederick's guards grabbed his arms and dragged him away toward the crypts. Crystal then turned to face the thousands of wolves gathered in the courtyard. Vanguard and Blood Moon alike. They stood shoulder to shoulder. Paula Webb and Leon Bennett stood at attention at the base of the stairs. Frederick Norris, the feared monster of the South, stepped forward and dropped to one knee, bowing his head in total submission. Slowly, like a wave rippling across an ocean, the entire Vanguard pack followed suit. The proud nobles, the hardened soldiers, the terrified villagers, they all fell to their knees. The courtyard became a vast sea of bowed heads. The era of arrogant kings, stolen thrones, and buried secrets is over. Crystal's voice washed over them, carrying the comforting, healing warmth of the dawn. The sickness in the veins of the Vanguard wolves began to clear at the sound of her voice. "We will heal this land. We will unite the packs of the North and the South. I do not demand your fear, for fear breeds monsters. I demand your loyalty to the light, your strength to defend the weak, and your honor to uphold the truth." Crystal walked past the broken, weeping form of Elliot Burke and ascended the grand stone steps toward the hall. She was no longer a rejected mate. She was the apex, the Silverborn Queen, and as she looked out at her united people, she knew she had finally reclaimed her crown. If you loved this intense, twist-filled tale of ancient magic, demonic betrayal, and a rejected mate claiming her ultimate vengeance, please like the video to support the channel. Crystal's evolution from a powerless outcast to the Silverborn Queen proves that true power comes from embracing who you really are and standing against the darkness. Do you think Elliot's punishment of living as an ordinary, powerless wolf was worse than death? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to share this incredible story with your friends. And subscribe for more epic werewolf dramas, cinematic audiobooks, and thrilling fantasy tales. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload.